Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Allegory Story podcast. My name is Melanie Nevis,
And I'm Tegan Aline.
and today we are going to be talking about one of my favorites, actually, which is The Little Mermaid.
Oh, yeah. Oh, look, I dressed appropriately. I didn't
You
even do that on purpose.
you did. I
Shit. Little Mermaid
did not.
aesthetic. You've got some blue going on. I've noticed since I colored my hair this coppery color that I've been attracted to aquas and blues. And it's now we're actually coming to that point where the Little Mermaid, that the new Little Mermaid has just been released, right? And I was
Yeah.
I swear I'm having a mermaid moment, but I didn't do that on purpose. It just happened naturally.
So, okay, with that, then, what image comes to mind when you hear the word mermaid?
Oh, so many. So many. First of all, I think, well, obviously, I think in terms of media, because I've consumed an absurd amount of media in my life. So I think of the classical Disney Little Mermaid, the purple shell bra, the red hair, part of your world,
The arm action with us. Great.
that whole thing. I think about that. I also think of this a show that I told you about a little while ago that was I think an Australian TV show. I think about sirens, the women that call men into the water. That's on the darker side of things. I've never really known what the difference between a siren and a mermaid was.
I'll tell you today.
Okay, yeah. So that's kind of what I think of, in the cartoony sense. I think of the fishtail and pretty girly on top, and then also I think of this dark enchantress luring men to their death in the water.
Yeah.
Two realms of thought.
Yeah. So I think that is very true. I think that for a lot of people, it is Ariel. I think maybe that'll change with the live action Disney version, but I did watch it, and
Oh, you've seen it? Oh, I want to see it.
it's just okay.
What?
And here's why. I'm not a huge fan of musicals for the most part. And so when you actually have people singing, I'm not a Glee person. The only musical I kind of like is Dr. Horrible's Sing Along blog with Neil Patrick Harris and Nathan Fillion. And
Well,
it's
Neil
freaking
Patrick Harris
amazing.
makes Broadway cool. Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I just have a general, I don't know about this, but if it's in a cartoon version, I accept it a lot more. I don't know why.
I understand. I understand what you're saying, but as a musical theater nerd,
I know.
I have to
I know. I know.
agree to
I get it.
disagree.
But it's also I find that it's different on Broadway and in theater than it is on television or in the movies.
Yeah.
And I don't know why my brain makes such a distinction, but it is.
Yeah,
Anyways,
I get it. I think it's kind of tricky. The minute they started trying to add the musical elements into these live action Disneys, I was I liked it better when they weren't necessarily doing that, where they were just retelling
yeah.
the story. But
Yeah, and I think
anyway.
that's where, because and especially watching it as an adult, seeing people just sing for a couple of minutes, I'm like, but get back to the plot.
I really love the way that they casted this new movie.
That I like.
I'm so obsessed with Halle Bailey as the Little Mermaid. I think she's a fucking stunner. And apparently she's also incredibly sweet and lovely to work with. But also Melissa McCarthy as
Yes.
or is it McCarthy or McCartney? No, it's McCarthy,
I think. Yeah.
I fucking love her. I love her so much. And I love her as Ursula. Yeah.
Yes.
That is so good.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
beautiful.
Exactly.
So anyway.
But I think for a lot of people that you do kind of think of Ariel. You think of the red-headed Disney princess who trades in her tail for a pair of legs and her voice for a chance to win a life at land with the guy that she loves.
Yeah, I'm an 80s baby, so that's my first frame of reference.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting too, because The Little Mermaid is just what we were exposed to because we were children. But there was an adult movie in the 80s that was produced by Touchstone, which is Disney's like adult brand, I guess,
Oh.
named Splash. And
Oh,
in
I've seen
Splash,
Splash.
yeah, so they came out at similar times. So Splash, the mermaid, was blonde. With the Little Mermaid, they intentionally provided Ariel with red hair so that she would look different, and like there was a very clear difference between the two. But like
Oh.
there's a lot of like our culture has a really vast collection of mermaid literature and art, and then more recently movies. So I think the very first mermaid movie kind of came out in 1904, but the first feature film was in 1914, and it was called Neptune's Daughter, and it was a black and white silent film.
Oh,
And
wow.
like they've been coming out throughout the last century, and we just have the Little Mermaid as our main point of reference.
Right.
If we look at recent history and like recent stories that we've been exposed to with mermaids, they generally have the same sort of repeating elements, which is a beautiful singing voice. They've got a mirror and a comb,
Mm.
nice, long, lovely hair, a weakness for human men, and a powerful influence over those men as well. I think it's fair to say.
Gee, I can't
And
see where the men's opinion came into these stories at all. A weakness for human men. They've got those
I mean,
legs.
yeah,
Yeah.
there is this one movie, and I can't for the life of me remember when it came out exactly and what it's called, but it is a black and white movie. And in this movie, the mermaid does not speak at all. This guy finds her and like keeps talking to her, and his obsession with her and like sexual obsession and like I don't know, like it just encompasses the entire movie, and it
Hmm.
encompasses her frame of reference. You don't really ever learn it because she never talks. It's all
Oh,
about the
wow.
male's perspective. It's really interesting. But
Ooh, what's
anyways,
that called? Sorry.
I forgot, and I will find it and
Sure.
I will put
Okay.
it in the description
Okay.
but it's an old black and white movie. The mermaid herself is often this adventurous spirit. She's often self-educated, and there's a dark sister sea witch that's there to complicate her plans in some way. As a person of the wide open sea, she's connected to this notion of freedom and liberation. And in a lot of tales, when uh, they you think of like trapping or confining her in any way, then there's this air of lament, and like it would be a crime to condemn this soul to captivity.
Hmm.
um, Another common thing that you see is that she doesn't really believe in conventionality or ritual or tradition, right? She's kind of like
Oh,
breaking those things.
right.
And the story almost always follows along the lines of like love. There's some sort of love story. The Little Mermaid is generally all about this pure love that needs to overcome obstacles.
Hmm.
But mermaids themselves are very, very old. Um, and stories of mermaids are really, really old. So that's like all in much more recent culture. But they can be found in every culture from like all continents. And Atargatis is said to be the original inspiration for mermaid stories. So she was an Assyrian goddess worshipped 3 to 4,000 years ago in ancient
Oh.
Assyria. And then later, like all over the Mediterranean. And she's said to be the goddess of the moon, fertility, and water. So all things related to very feminine power.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Those three combined, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So the story of how Atargatis actually becomes a mermaid is a little bit sad. So according to
Okay.
the myth, Atargatis falls in love with a mortal shepherd named Adad, and they have a daughter together named Semiramis, who later becomes the queen of Assyria. And this is just like a little side note. There is a legend that Semiramis was most well known for creating the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon, not
Ooh.
the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II. So, like,
Mm.
the more commonplace thing is that Nebuchadnezzar had created the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, but there is a legend that Semiramis did it and became this
Oh.
Assyrian queen as well, which is
Oh.
cool.
Okay.
Okay,
Wouldn't
back.
surprise me, I guess, based on everything we've seen so far. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I took credit for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm not
Atargatis.
bashing. I'm just saying.
No, it's just
I'm
how
not hating. I love my husband, but I'm just
it's how
speculating
history
at the
has
obvious, you know.
kind of repeated itself over and over again.
Yeah.
So, Atargatis accidentally causes the death of her husband, and I searched trying to find what exactly was the cause, and I couldn't find anything. Everything just says she accidentally caused the death of her husband, but not how. But she's so racked with guilt that she drowns herself. And she's incredibly beautiful. So in death,
Oh.
the waters transform her into a woman with the tail of a fish, and she becomes the first mermaid.
Oh, that's
Um,
sad and dark.
yeah, but like also kind of lovely in its own weird way. So she was worshipped in a temple built for her in Israel, and it said that the temple was made of gold and diamonds, and
Mm.
that there was a pool with living fish. And in order to get to the altar, people would actually have to swim through this pool with living fish. And I don't know, that's just sounds so beautiful to me.
That's
Like
that was a real place, or it's like lost to
it's
myth and we
said
really don't know.
it's lost to, like, we don't
Okay.
really know, but that's the legend. Like that's part of this myth, that there is this temple and you
Sounds
actually have to dive through this
gorgeous.
pool of fish to get to the altar. And both fish and doves are sacred to Atargatis, because when she decides to drown herself, she actually leaves her daughter out on the banks, and you know kind of just leaves her to the elements. Her daughter is actually rescued by doves. So the symbols for Atargatis as fish and doves, and they're sacred to her. So doves symbolize love, and fish are a symbol of fertility and bounty. So she's said to be the
Mm.
first mermaid legend ever to be told. Water is the element of emotions. Um, there's a transformation that happens and is initiated because of a broken heart.
Mm-hmm.
And all mermaids contain the same elements that Atargatis possessed, right?
Mm.
There's like this healing power of water, a beauty that can't be hidden. There's connection to the moon and to the tides, waves, and emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And she's the goddess of transformation. So her followers would pray to her to face their fears and to face their darkest selves so that they could love and appreciate all that they are.
Interesting. I still feel bad for her daughter. Like
Yeah,
I'm
I know.
sitting
She
here
becomes
listening to
an
this
Assyrian
being
queen.
I'm
She
sitting
does
here
become an
listening to
Assyrian
this
queen.
being like, but how could you leave your baby on the banks of the water?
I know. I know.
But she becomes a queen. She's saved by
She becomes
doves.
a queen. And she, in one story, builds the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. So it's a little bit
Okay.
of a sad story, but there's really
Like,
beautiful elements to it, I think.
mm-hmm.
Um and then the spirit kind of continues on, and we see it in the Greek goddess Aphrodite. Venus is the Roman counterpart, goddess of beauty and love. And Aphrodite does not have a fishtail, but she was born of sea foam. And in Ovid's Metamorphosis, it mentions Venus actually transforming into a fish to
Mm,
disguise herself. So to this
okay.
day, the mermaid at its core seems to be a Venus like embodiment of beauty and love.
Okay,
Like,
I see. I see. Yeah,
like
that's
she's beautiful
interesting.
herself, but she also really sees the beauty in the world around her and teaches humans to reopen their eyes to all the beauty that they've become blind to. And in her less innocent iterations, she's well aware of her charms, and the mirror can be seen as a symbol of her vanity. But I think that
Ah,
the Little Mermaid at its core, like I think a lot of kids actually really did like it, because she's a relatable character. She does have this childlike sense of wonder and is excitable and is curious. Like she's just got this insatiable curiosity, and I feel like a lot of children have that. I
absolutely.
definitely had it. I think I still do. I like to be curious about the world around me.
Hello,
But
that's
she
how we
approaches
got
it.
here.
Yeah, that's how we got here. But she approaches it with like just the wonderment of a child, right?
Mhm.
But before we get into that, I just want to say, like, I just mentioned the innocent iterations or less innocent iterations. And so um, people will often refer to them as sirens, right? Like you kind of thought of them as well. And they use the terms interchangeably. And that has
Oh, that's
happened more
interesting.
recently.
I
So,
always
like,
thought there was like a difference between the two.
there
Like
is
I
a difference between the two, but a lot of people kind of will just be like, well, sirens are, well, what do you think of when you think of sirens?
Okay, so what I think of this like the old story of like these women who would like lure men on fishing boats, like off the boats, and they would swim into the water to find the woman, and then the woman would like kiss them, and they'd like drown and like kill the guys. It's very like one sided, doesn't make any sense. A lot of
Okay.
questions to be asked, but that's kind of like what I think of when I think of sirens. And I also think of Tidelanders. The Netflix series Tidelanders, which was amazing and deserves a second season. Come on, Netflix. Anyway, I digress. It's a good show.
Like, I think that a lot of people do just see sirens as like the dark mermaids. And in that way, they just use the terms interchangeably, where like mermaids are the light version and sirens are the dark version. Um, so a lot of people think that sirens are also half fish like mermaids, but they are actually half winged creatures. So like they are half bird.
They have
In
wings?
the
Sirens are
original,
supposed
they
to
have,
have wings?
yes, in the original stories, in the original Greek stories, they have wings. So that's a
Mm.
major difference. But like the differences exist in a few other things. That's the major difference. They are not the same species. Um,
Oh,
they
that's so
are
interesting that we've kind of just lumped them together and they're like totally two different things.
they're two different things. They are labeled negatively, right? They're labeled as
Sirens, yeah.
temptresses, enchantresses, charmers. They
Yeah.
tempt men to their deaths. And mermaids are often referred to in more of like a neutral or a positive term. And they're just called like water nymphs and water deities. They're depicted as beautiful creatures living in the sea and are just not associated with the same negative stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where mermaids and mermaid stories and legends are found literally in every corner of the globe, sirens are exclusive to Greek and Roman mythology. And
Oh, so of
they,
course they're dark because everything in Greek and Roman mythology is fucked up.
yes, absolutely. But they're featured
With
specifically
respect, of course.
with,
I
but they
love
are
those
featured
stories.
like, of who doesn't? They're
Yeah,
featured
yeah.
specifically in those. And again, mermaids are like all over the place. Sirens are very much Western tradition, Greek Roman mythology. Um,
Mm.
they live in these Greek and Roman myths. They live on rocky islands and are fathered by the god Achelous.
Mm.
Um, but they just live on the rocky islands. Like they don't live around them in the water. They are land dwellers. And they don't
Oh,
generally use
interesting.
their wings, but like they live on islands, they live on land. Whereas mermaids obviously will come up on the shore and they'll like come up on rocks, but they are sea dwellers. Um, and traditionally as well, and this is interesting because it did get incorporated into later mermaid stories of like the mermaid using her voice. That's what we know now. Traditionally, that wasn't a thing for mermaids. Sirens used their voice to lure men. Mermaids
Oh.
just used their beauty, right? So sirens had beauty
Oh,
and a
okay.
voice. Mermaids just used their beauty and they attracted men using love and affection. Um, and then the reason for attracting men, like we don't really know. Sirens just have this weird animalistic, instinctive need to kill.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel like Greek and like because Greek mythology kind of converts or like shifts into the Roman mythology at one point. I feel like there's their stories are just usually so dark and they usually depict women either I think it's I don't know if it's the beginning of it, but it feels like it could potentially be the beginning of where we see the division between like the virtuous girl and the
mm,
evil woman. You know what I mean? So That's a speculation that we'll have to dive into later. But yeah, I can see it. I
Yeah.
get
I mean,
it.
like, yeah, if it made its way into these tales, I think the patriarchy was already alive and well during Greek and Roman times. And in ancient cultures, it's like goddesses were celebrated, and there were more matriarchal societies, I think. Like, but we have to
I'm
go
very
past Greek and
interested.
Roman.
I'm very, very interested to like dive into the Greek side of things, which I think we're going to do at some point. Um,
For sure. Oh,
so really be
absolutely.
interested to explore all of. I feel like we'll be touching on a lot of these stories again, the ones that have these origins, and
Oh,
looking
yeah,
at them from another
because
perspective.
yeah, I think sirens really became made famous, I guess, in Homer's Odyssey. Um, and
Yeah,
that you can't talk about Greek lore without talking about that epic
yeah, it's
tale.
like one of
So
their epic stories, right? Yeah.
exactly. And then yeah, so a mermaid's story is typically about love, right? She feels inspired, or she inspires love at first sight, and kind of falls in love at first sight. She gives herself instantly and totally, and she's driven by this pure and shameless sexuality and expresses her emotions without feeling self-conscious so much. So she's just like this deeply instinctive being, but like a light version, because sirens are also deeply instinctive. And I think that's where that animalistic side comes to
I love
be, and like
that.
why they just like lure men as well. But it's the idea of like,
Deeply instinctive light.
yes,
I love
yeah,
that.
yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And with the mermaid having men fall in love with her, the mermaid is like a sexual fantasy. I think it's safe to say that like mermaid can be seen as a sexual fantasy. And many of her symbols have like the shell and the comb. In ancient Greek and Latin, the words carry a double connotation, also relating to
Um,
the pubic area. So like the mermaid is almost the symbol of unattainable sexuality.
oh, interesting. Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
Those are the main differences, I guess, between mermaids and sirens.
Yeah.
So we use them to like talk about, Ursula is depicted in that way. Like she's depicted as this siren-esque creature in a
I
sense.
was
But
thinking that. Yeah. Yeah, in a
yeah,
way.
in a way. So I feel like The Little Mermaid is so relatable because it's a woman in transition.
Yeah.
On one level, she symbolizes a coming of age for a young woman. So it's a story of a woman's metamorphosis or a girl's metamorphosis into an adult. And the hybrid of human and fish is like a very apt metaphor for the adolescent who is like half in childhood and half in adulthood. And
Mm.
she's eager to grow up. She's eager to become fully human and get those legs. And her dad wants her to stay a fish. He doesn't want his little girl to grow up too quickly. So it's this perfect parable of puberty because there's like a real physicality in that transition.
Mm.
And the change from fins to legs mirrors a young woman's changing sexuality. And, her getting legs coincides with her falling in love.
Mm.
And meanwhile, losing her tail feels like a loss. And you don't realize it as you're growing up. You're like, I want to be an adult. I want to do this. I want to do that. And you get to adulthood and there's a sense of loss that you feel for not having necessarily enjoyed or understood your childhood for what it was while it was there.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
this like sadness, and like all of these changes are messy and painful. And Little Mermaid characters are a little bit boy crazy. So like they echo this adolescent excitement over first crushes, and it captures a teen's enthusiasm for what's to come, right? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
as a character, she's really compelling because of her positive curiosity and courage, and like she's got this sense of adventure.
He's
And
very
at the same
relatable.
time,
Yeah.
it's so relatable. At the same time, she reflects this constant like conflict and struggle of the adolescence period. And she,
Mm-hmm.
she wants to do those things. She doesn't want to leave her family behind. And like, what does it all mean? Um, so she's very much a mixture of child and woman. And despite her charms, she's got this childlike sense of wonder and openness and a youthful way of looking at things that rejuvenates everyone that she comes across who may have been too worldly and like adult about it
I
all.
was going to say, and as adults, we can almost look at that and feel like that's a dangerous combination.
Oh, yeah.
To be like almost like in the body of a woman with the mind of a younger person. And I think, like, I don't
Yes.
know, I personally experienced that in my life growing up. I didn't
Same.
know I was naive until afterward, you know, but
Yeah.
yeah, very much.
Yeah.
And then how you relate that to people and who you have relationships with. Yeah.
Yes,
That's so interesting.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And in a broader term, and this is like much more recent, this mermaid being a symbol of flux is has been relatable to people who are going through transitions of any kind. So her story can be seen as an illustration of gender dysphoria for people who are going in transition or like
Mm.
dealing with that transition in any way. Others just relate to her as a story of being this outsider kind of between two worlds. So people that are immigrating and like trying to assimilate but not quite able to enter that world, and like a lot of things like you probably understand that more than most.
Yeah, except I like, yeah, except I had resistance to it and wasn't dying to be a part of this world
Right.
necessarily. But I do understand. Yeah, I absolutely understand that. And it's funny because, like, the whole time you've been talking about this stuff, I keep thinking about the part of your world song from like the Disney movie
Yeah.
because I think, I'll be honest, Little Mermaid wasn't my favorite. I don't know why. It feels like it has all of the makings for me to just love it, but for some reason I wasn't into it. And you know, and still that song kind of sticks out
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like there's also, like, at least in the Disney version, there's this like message of like wanting to feel safe, wanting to feel like you belong. And I think that's another thing
Yes.
like adolescents really struggle with and go through that and really have to deal with when they're growing up. When we're growing up, it's like right at, you know, we have to go through the, or we had to, I don't know if people still do, but like when I was growing up, there was definitely like that mean girl phase where people were like,
Mm-hmm.
being kind of mean and catty to each other. It was hard to feel like your friends were really your friends and that you felt
Mm-hmm.
safe. And there's that sense of like just wanting to get it over with already and wanting to belong and wanting to belong with your friends, belong with with a person, a guy, like a partner or whoever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can definitely see that like transitional, it's like all
Mm-hmm.
wrapped up in this kind of story. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And I guess so over time the mermaid starts out as this mythical creature, right, with Atargatis, and then over time she turns into one that people really believed that they existed. So by the time that Pliny the Elder was writing in the first century of the Common Era, people reported sightings of mermaids all over the place, and this really increased with maritime travel, like especially during the Age of Discovery between the 15th to 17th centuries. There were
Mm.
people always saying that they spotted mermaids. Um, so yeah, it transitioned from this mythical creature into like a being that really was believed to exist.
Mm.
And we've touched upon the light and dark versions. Obviously, the Little Mermaid Ariel is the light version, but and like I've already seen, kind of said this, like Ursula plays into this evil enchantress. She pairs her beauty, like she um, takes her voice, but also then has the ability to go on land as this beautiful siren-esque creature. Like she's not this creature with tentacles anymore. She changes and steals her voice, and so she pairs this beauty with this false illusion of human beings, and this dual form is really what Ursula uses to bewitch Eric.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's true.
Yeah, so mermaids as like these femme fatales then represent a pure sexual energy. And you could say that there's like this contrast of the light version representing sexual love and the dark version representing sex without love. And to make sense of her growing popularity, Christianity framed the mermaid siren as, and I like say that in quotation marks, siren, as a symbol of vice and temptation to men's souls.
Right.
So
that's kind of the context we know the word siren to be, like in this day.
Yeah. And
it's
like,
crazy
remember
how shit like that sticks.
And at that time, like when all this stuff was happening and Christianity really took the forefront, unbridled sex is seen as a threat to civilized Christian society. Mm-hmm. Right? And its building block, which is marriage.
Mm-hmm. Well, right. That's a good point.
Undines, or underwater spirits, are seen, so mermaids basically, are seen mentally as being just like people but lacking a soul. However, it was thought that a select few mermaids wanted to be saved, and a folklore developed that they could achieve an immortal soul by marrying a man.
Well, that sounds like something. That sounds like a conversion story now. Doesn't it?
Yeah. So, and this is where it gets interesting. And so, like, in the Disney's version's interpretation was written by Hans Christian Andersen in 1837. So that was kind of like or inspiration, not interpretation. That was the inspiration for the Disney version.
And he is
Danish. He's from Copenhagen. And so in Copenhagen, there's actually a statue of a mermaid that they've
duh. Yeah, I knew that. I know that. I was waiting for that part. Okay, yes. Okay.
Yeah. In this version that was written in 1837, the mermaid longs for a soul as much as she wants her beloved prince, which is, I think, interesting. In this version, the mermaid is unnamed, and she's the youngest of 6 children, much more interested in the world above the sea than her other sisters. And when she finally turns 15, she's been waiting for this day for a long time because she's seen her sisters go up and then tell stories of what they see when they're able to actually poke their head up and out of water. So when she finally turns 15, she's allowed to visit the surface and see what humans see every day. And she goes up and she sees this birthday party celebration thing happening on a ship. And she sees this beautiful prince that she kind of like zeroes in on instantly. Mm-hmm. And when the night comes, a storm comes along and destroys the ship. So the little mermaid is initially really excited when she sees the prince sinking beneath the water because he can join her. And she's like, yay, I have my prince here. And she quickly realizes that, humans can't breathe underwater. Yeah. So she rescues him and then takes him to the shore of a temple. But there are some novice girls that are like coming from the temple. And so she abandons ship and leaves it for the girls to actually restore the prince to consciousness. And the mermaid just goes back underwater. And the prince is completely unaware of her existence or that she has saved his life. What I also really like in this version is that she, like with Disney's version, she has this relationship with her father, but she doesn't really talk to anyone apart from Flounder of the treasures and trinkets that she's been collecting. She talks to her grandmother about humans in Hans Christian Andersen's version.
Interesting.
And so this generational knowledge is being passed down through an older woman, which is actually a lovely thing to see, and I think was very commonplace at the time as well. But she asks her grandmother about humans and learns that humans don't live as long as mermen, who can live up to 300 years, but that they do have immortal souls, which float up to heaven when they die, unlike mermen who don't have souls.
Interesting.
And their body just turns to sea foam, and that's it. So the Little Mermaid said that she would trade 300 years of life as a mermaid for one day as a human if it meant that she would have a soul and live forever. So the grandmother is just like, don't think about that sort of stuff, because the only way that a mermaid could gain a soul is if the human loved her enough that his soul would merge with hers and
oh boy,
she would gain one.
Merman,
Okay.
Dad. Merman. Sorry. I watched Zoolander not too long ago.
Great.
Oh no, is this where soulmates come from? Or is this like, I don't know, that whole idea around like the souls, like souls completing each other or fitting each other? Ooh, sounds very Catholic.
It's very Catholic. Yeah, it's, well, certainly like any kind of Christianity. That's like, yay, souls. Anyways, the Little Mermaid realizes that she loves the handsome prince and she would give anything to be with him and to gain an immortal soul. So she decides to visit the one woman who could help her, the sea witch, who later becomes known as Ursula. And she says that she will make the mermaid a potion, which she must take onto land with her to drink. And her tail will turn into two human legs. She won't be able to transform back into a mermaid again. And it will hurt her when she walks. It'll be like pins and needles when she walks. So, like, this does not sound like a really good deal.
Yeah.
And if the prince does not marry her, she doesn't gain an immortal soul. She dies. She becomes foam upon the water, as is the fate for soulless men, the day that the prince marries someone else.
Oh,
Okay, so
shady.
she's like really deciding to turn her back on her family and culture here and go after the thing that she wants. But it also comes with a lot of pain and it comes with no guarantee that it'll work out
Mm-hmm.
happily for her. So she is so ready to gain this immortal soul to marry the prince that despite this gamble, she also agrees on the payment for this, which is her voice. So she's going up into this world with the inability to communicate in pain. She can't sing, she can't speak, and it hurts when she walks. So she floats up, drinks this potion, she falls unconscious, she wakes up, and the handsome prince is standing over her, asking her where she comes from. But obviously, the
She
sea
can't
witch
answer.
doesn't just take her voice. Apparently, like she takes her tongue.
Oh, double shade. So she's like
Yeah,
full
so
on mute.
she just like she's full on mute. She cannot answer, and he takes her to the palace, gives her like the finest clothes to wear, and even though she can't speak, she has this beauty that was not taken away from her, and it's very much appreciated and admired at court. And she does grow closer to the prince, and at night she can like look out into the ocean and see her sisters as they like come up to the surface, because they'll come up to the surface at night, and they tell her how sad that they are that she left them behind.
I'm
So
sorry, but I just feel like I gotta call a little bit of shade. This guy finds this girl on the beach. She's gorgeous and she can't fucking talk. And he's like, perfect. Perfect. Exactly what I was looking for. Like,
yeah, someone
it
who
just,
doesn't talk back.
yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, exactly. It just feels like I smell some patriarchal sentiment. Not to look at every single story we do from like a feminist standpoint, but it feels weird.
I
Anyway.
mean, a lot of them are written by men.
Yeah, that's so
So
weird. Anyways, okay.
yeah, so she learns that the prince is fond of her, but he has fallen in love with the pretty girl at the temple who brought him back to life instead. So like he's
Ah.
fond of her, but he doesn't love her.
Okay, maybe he's
He
not as
doesn't
bad as I was
know.
thinking. I kind of get that.
No, I don't. I don't think so. He's fond of her though, but he doesn't love her, and
She's
he
friend
is completely
zoned.
unaware. Pardon?
She's friend zoned. She's
Yeah,
been friend zoned.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's completely unaware that she's the one that actually dragged him up to shore, and thinks that this other woman saved his life. So she can't tell him the truth,
Mm-hmm.
and he's going to marry this girl, this like princess from another kingdom, to form an alliance. And she's really, really sad. And her
Rightfully.
sisters kind of find out what is going on. she's heartbroken, and the sisters go visit the sea witch. They cut off all of their hair in exchange for a dagger because she's going to die. Like, if he marries this woman, she's going to die. The Little
Oh,
Mermaid will
right.
die. She'll
Yeah.
turn into sea foam, and her soul is lost. And she's just like heartbroken. She took this major gamble and it is not paying off. She did this all in vain. So, yeah, her sisters are trying to help her out. They sacrifice their hair to the sea witch in exchange for this magical dagger, and they hand it to her. And she has to plunge the dagger into the heart of the prince, and once his blood touches her feet, it will merge them together to reform her tail. And then she can go back as a mermaid.
Oh shit, this just got serious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah. So she sneaks in and sees the prince and his bride sleeping together in a tent on the ship, and she can't go through with it. So she just hurls the dagger into the ocean, and she turns into sea foam and goes overboard, and her spirit kind of floats up into the air.
No way, that's the ending?
Yeah, so her spirit floats up into the air, and she is informed by other mermaid spirits or daughters of the air that while they cannot gain a soul, they have a chance to do so if they provide a useful service to the world by bringing cooling breezes and hot winds in warmer parts of the globe. So, like, she embodies the stuff, and she has to do this for 3 centuries. So, those 300 years, she has to be of service to the air for 300 years, and then she can create an everlasting soul. And that's how
Huh.
the story of The Little Mermaid ends. So, I find that version really, really interesting on a lot of different fronts. Like, Disney went with this like very happy romantic ending, but
Of
like
course, yeah.
Anderson's tale is a paradox. Like, it is a tragic tale, but ultimately has a happy ending. And you know, he avoids the expected end of like him of Eric and, well, he wasn't named Eric, of the prince and the
Yeah.
Little Mermaid living happily ever after, with her gaining a soul and truly joining the world of humans. Like, that doesn't happen. It's a bittersweet ending. It's a little bit more mature and a little more realistic, where like the moral of that is we can't make people love us if they do not. And we have
Mhm.
to live with that fact. Like, unrequited love is really difficult. The best we can do is just act well towards them in the world at large, and then you may still benefit from that. So, like, taking all of that into account, it's really hard to difficult, or like really hard and difficult to analyze what the Little Mermaid actually means. Like, is it a story about love or immortality or selflessness or about religion?
Mhm.
Is it like, do we look at the feminist interpretation of the tale, which sees the price that young women pay for marriage and motherhood, of like the intense pain to her lower body that she undergoes
Mhm.
if she wants to be the prince, being mute, physical pain, the loss of talent, so she loses her voice, and a curtailing of her freedom that she leaves behind her world and her family to marry into his.
I
Like,
feel
so
like
it's like a paradox, and
yeah.
I love it for that.
I feel like I heard a story. I don't know if you've heard about this. You can correct me if I'm not. I'm probably not going to tell it very well, but I've heard this thing in on like through social media that he like that Hans Christian Andersen wrote this story because he was gay and he was in a relationship, but they could never really be together because of
Oh,
the way that society viewed like homosexual relationships at that time. So
yeah.
the whole premise of Ariel and that paradox is like a resemblance of like what those two were going through, and he wrote the story to kind of explain the alienation that he was feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and the feelings of knowing like that they couldn't ultimately be together.
That's really interesting. I hadn't heard that before.
Oh,
That's
really? Oh my
fascinating, actually.
gosh.
Yeah.
I'm going to find that video and send it to you, because that's
Yeah.
a really interesting like
It's
perspective to know if
super
that's like,
interesting. Yeah.
I might be saying it wrong, because like I said, I saw it on social media in passing, but I thought it was like really, really interesting when I did see it. So yeah, okay, I'll send that to you if I can find it.
Yeah, please do. But I think that that's why The Little Mermaid is so fascinating. Like there are so many interpretations and so many things that you can pull from it that make it so relatable. Like it's not
Mhm.
just about
It is kind
love.
of like more bittersweet than our average story. Like it has a
Mhm.
certain, and maybe that's something to be said about, like, I guess we're dealing with the like Hans Christian Andersen version, which is Danish, you said, right?
Mhm.
Maybe there's something about the fact that it's like a more modern like Danish story. Like I say more modern because of course like the Danes in Scandinavia has all the connections to like Viking lore and this and that. This is a
Yeah.
way more modern in a sense like story, but maybe there's something about it, like I don't know, it just doesn't hit the same way. It hits like a kind of a bittersweet story where it's quite sad,
Mhm.
and the ending isn't actually so bad, but it's not like a fantastically happy ending either. It's not so bad
No.
ending.
And then you have to ask, like, was she actually motivated by love? Did she really fall in love with him? Or was it like a means to an end? Did she really want this immortal soul and just saw this as a way to get it and like wanted it so badly?
I don't think it could be that, because if it could be that, wouldn't she have just, if that's what she wanted so badly, why wouldn't she just like, I don't know, try to kill the other girl or something? Like she ends up being really
I mean,
selfless, which I feel like is more
yes.
connected in these types of stories to like really loving someone, if you're going to give up yourself for
I
that
mean,
person's
like,
happiness.
but even, okay, so even if I was in her position, I don't know that I have the guts to actually kill someone.
Yeah,
Doesn't
that's true.
matter
That's
if
very
I'm so
real.
envious. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have the will to do that.
I thought all people from like older times were just like down to kill people because they were so
Oh,
used to
sure.
it. I'm just
They're so
joking.
used to it. Like,
I'm just joking. That's a shitty thing to
let's
say.
go kill Happy.
Yeah, but
It's the bloodlust.
I do think it's a really, I do actually like that she gets an alternative, in a way, like an alternative ending, that
Hmm.
she can become part of the breeze. And I feel like it's just kind of convenient that that part got left out. That's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So obviously, Disney went with the version that we know where like she falls in love with the prince and everything's fine. But I think that even in the Disney version, it's appealing because it hits a lot of the things that we talked about earlier of this being this person in transition, right? Like she's a young person in transition who has an an innocent outlook. I'm not even going to call it naive, but like an innocent outlook on
Mhm.
things and is excitable and everything like that. But the Hans Christian Andersen version has a lot more depth. There's a lot more paradox, like just contrasts that are happening. And I really, really like it.
Yeah,
There's so
that's
many
really cool.
like different ways that you can take it.
What else has
But
he
yeah.
written? Has he written other stories as well, or is this one like kind of his most famous?
Yeah, that's his most famous. He's written a lot of stuff. The Nightingale, The Red Shoes, The Ugly Duckling, Snow Queen,
Ah.
Thumbelina, Little Match Girl.
Oh, the Little Match Girl, so sad. Oh,
I know.
that
Yeah.
one's
Yeah. So he's
incredibly
another
sad.
famous
Okay, because I thought
fairy tale
I've
writer.
seen other things of his.
So that is the story of The Little Mermaid. I love that there are like so many different paradoxes. And I keep saying that word, but I really don't know a better word to describe what it is. There's just like contrasts and opposing views, and so
Yeah,
many things you can take from it.
it's really so interesting. I didn't realize that the Hans Christian Andersen version ended that way. But like I said, it's bizarrely sad and optimistic at the same time. So I think
Yeah.
that's a nice way to end it. So that's where we're gonna wrap for today. Join us next time where we'll be talking about something completely horrifying.
Rumpelstiltskin.
Ah.
It's gonna be great. We'll see you
Yay!
next time.
I will see you.